Blade Runner. I have wanted to talk about this movie ever since I started this channel. If you've been with this channel since the beginning, you would know this, but I'm glad I finally get to talk about it. Blade Runner. Clearly, I love Blade Runner. This is my set of Blade Runner. It's a limited edition set, includes all versions of the film that were ever made, including the original work print that never went to theaters. It's a wonderful thing, and it's probably my favorite possession that I have. It's fantastic. And I will be mostly reviewing the final cut of the movie, which is the usual definitive cut of the movie, the one everyone says is the best. But I will offer brief thoughts on the other cuts of the movie. The work print is the version that never went to theaters. It's very rough. It's very rough. You can still see some of the cables that are used to hoist a car. Some of the dialogue is a bit different. And of course, visually, it doesn't look as good as the other cuts. There are spoilers for this video, of course. The theatrical cut has Harrison Ford's narration over it because the critics, when they saw the work print, they thought the movie was too vague, it was too ambiguous, and that the audience wouldn't get it. So Harrison was contractually obligated to make a narration for the movie, which he has famously hated, and so that was made. The UK theatrical cut is pretty much the same, except a few extra seconds of violence is added, and that's really the only difference. The 1992 director's cut was not signed off by Ridley Scott. It was the first version that had the narration taken out, and the happy ending where Rachel and Deckard drive off into a place that clearly does not look like the place where Blade Runner is set, and they're escaping together. That is omitted, and it's got a unicorn sequence, which I will talk about, and the final cut is pretty much the same as the director's cut, although it's cleaned up and tweaked, and everything is made to look better. I love Blade Runner. The first time I saw Blade Runner was a few years back, and I remember thinking, wow, this is Blade Runner? And I remember I had to watch it about 3 times before I finally got it. I mentioned in a previous review that R-rated movies, I usually try not to watch them. They usually aren't my thing. And that stands. There are like 90% of R-rated movies I will not watch, and I probably will not ever review. But Blade Runner is one of the few R-rated movies I can watch and I can enjoy. There is a bit of language in this movie. There is blood. There is violence in this movie. There's a scene where there's a guy where the Rutger Hauer, who plays Roy Batty, he puts a nail through his hand, and you see that in the final cut. Might disturb some people. There is a scene of nudity in this movie as well, and there's a bit of a confusing love-ish scene that happens in the movie as well. So if those kinds of things will make you feel a little disturbed and you don't feel like you want to watch that, Blade Runner is not for you. Blade Runner is not an action movie. It isn't a movie full of explosions and gunshots and intense sequences. Although there are some, it's not the point of the movie. Blade Runner is the search for humanity, really. The 2 main characters, I would say, are Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, and Roy Batty, the leader of the replicants, who's played by Rutger Hauer. And Sean Young plays Rachel, and it's directed by Ridley Scott. I love Ridley Scott's work. He's a wonderful director. And this movie, in a nutshell, is about replicants that are made by a company called the Tyrell Corporation. They are made for off-world labor. So there's a world off of Earth that these replicants are sent to for exploration, for mining, for just exploring the solar system and doing slave labor. And some of them escape, especially Roy Batty. He brings some friends to Earth, to the Tyrell Corporation, because they have a 4-year lifespan, and they want more life. And Deckard, he's looking for a reason to live. At the beginning of Blade Runner, you find out that he quit being a Blade Runner for reasons we don't really know. If you watch the theatrical cut in the narration, you learn that Deckard stopped because he had had his taste of killing. And that serves fine. But the movie progresses, and Deckard is looking for these replicants that he is supposed to hunt down and kill. Meanwhile, he's supposed to kill one played by Sean Young named Rachel, and he falls in love with her. And he, at first, is very disturbed by this because he's supposed to kill her and he's falling in love with her. He doesn't know what to do about this. So he keeps her in his apartment. And their romance is the one thing that doesn't really work in the movie because famously the two of them did not get along well on set, as well as Harrison did not get along well with Ridley. And though they've made up in recent years in the movie, you can tell that there was probably a bit of hostility on the set because some of their lines, their dialogue, and their scenery doesn't quite fit. But this movie is fantastic. If you like the noir, dark, detective movies, and you like this kind of stuff, watch it. It's a wonderful movie, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I am not talking that very much about it, but you should just see it. It is a wonderful piece of filmmaking. Another one of my favorite movie props is Deckard's pistol, his blaster. It goes by different names. It is a wonderful piece of prop. It's amazing. And really, my only complaints with this movie is that it does feel a bit slow. Some of the violence is a little bit too much. There's a scene where there's a replicant named Priss, and Deckard shoots her. He has to shoot her 3 times before she dies, but while she's dying, she spends the whole time screaming, and it gets to be a little bit, spine-chilling, where you're like, oh, is this really necessary? But other than that, it's okay. There's a scene where Rutger Hauer is, poking Tyrell's eyes out. That can be a little intense for some people. And of course, there's the nudity in this movie, which is not necessary, but it's something you can avoid if you really want to. You don't have to watch it, This movie is not for everybody. It certainly is not. I like Blade Runner. I've watched it with quite a few people recently, and everyone's opinions is that I've watched it with. It is a good movie. It is very significant. It still looks fantastic. This movie came out in 1982. The final cut was made in 2007. It is a wonderful looking movie. It is very important to the history of cinema, and it gets an 8.5 out of 10 from me. I believe that might be up there with the highest ratings I've had on my channel so far. I love Blade Runner, and you should watch it. If you have an opinion on Blade Runner, leave it in the comments below. Let me know. And of course, check out my other movie reviews. I will have other reviews coming very soon. Thank you so much for watching. You guys are all great. Thank you. Take care.